Hold on tight for the next hour. You're entering into a place, a zone called the alternative to the alternative media. It's a place, a special place where even truth seekers fear to tread.
All right, people, let's move like we've got a purpose.
Affirmative.
Okay, boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the greatest show on earth. I told you that yesterday. I'll tell you that again today. Glad you're back. Whoa, what a show we have for you today. Yes, Greg Anthony here, Investigative Journal. We discuss the Vatican-led New World Order every day on this show only because the mainstream media, most of the alternative media is not doing their job. They're preoccupied with things that really aren't important. And so, one, to listen to this show, you have to be inquisitive. You have to understand that you're being led by the nose by both the Democrat and Republican Party if you live in America. And if you live somewhere else, then it's probably the same in your country, just with different names. And also, you have to really declare whether you're a man or a woman before you listen, and then check your birth certificate. And you can't change what's on there. If it says you're a boy, you're a boy. You can't just, during the show, go, no, I feel like a girl. So no going to, transgender bathrooms. No changing your sex just because a nice girl walked into the bathroom and you're sitting there going, well, I feel like a girl now. Nope, you're not doing that. That's the Democrat. Do you listen to the Democratic Socialist Party in America? The insanity coming out of those people? It's all meant to tell you what really is going to happen in America in the future. Yes, they're just getting you used to it. This is just the beginning. They've begun to rip this country apart from top to bottom. Everything. So on this show, we're going to tell you who did it, who is behind it. And we believe that it's the Jesuit and the Vatican-led New World Order, along with all their minions in government and politics and business and in Freemasonry. You name it, they've got it. And I'll tell you, they're doing a number on the whole world. So, I did mention birth certificates, right? Now, it's very important. You each have one, right? And when you look on that birth certificate, you're going to see that your name is in capital letters. Well, why is that important, Greg? Why are you talking about capital letters? Nobody even writes anymore. Nobody knows how to write in cursive. Nobody even knows how to spell. They got spell check. You never need to know. You don't need to write. All you need is go into your computer. But yesterday, well, the reason capital letters are important is it means that what's on that birth certificate isn't you. It's a fiction. And yesterday I interviewed Terry in 2006, but I replayed an interview because I've rekindled my interest in this subject because I think it's quite important. Now, I interviewed a guy by the name of Terry Lee for 2 hours. I actually interviewed him for about 20 hours in 2006. And he explains how to be a free man and not a slave to the U.S. corporate America. He outlines steps to become a sovereign citizen in what I think is the best way, because it's not the easy way. Oh, you're going to find these patriot groups out. And this is another interesting thing. After I did replayed that show yesterday, I decided to look how the internet treats if you want to be a sovereign citizen. They consider a sovereign citizen to be anti-American. And then they started citing all these groups that are fringe conspiracy theorists, and they say that these people don't want to be American. It's not true. We want to be a sovereign citizen is basically what this country was founded on. A sovereign citizen of all of these beautiful states that we have. Each one of us being born in one of those states, and when we're born to that state separately, we are free. We think if you're calling yourself a sovereign and you haven't done the steps that we outlined yesterday and what I'm going to tell you today, then you really aren't. But let's say that the word sovereign and you think you're a sovereign citizen, well, it's not like they say on the internet. It's not anti-American. It's anti-corporation, anti-slave. That's really what it's anti. And I was just shocked when I looked at all these articles talking bad about sovereignty. So what do these people want to be? They want to be slaves to the U.S. corporate system. Nothing more than property. Nothing more than used by the corporation in Washington, D.C. for their own benefit. And that name on your birth certificate proves it. Okay, so my dog is going crazy because they found out, too, that their birth certificate is in capital letters, too. Oh, one of these days I'm going to get a nice studio and block the dogs. But anyway, that's not a real big interruption. And that brings me to a point. I finally figured out how to use Audacity. It's a recording device, so that when I play this interview from Terry Lee today, you're not going to get any background noise. And I figured it finally took me a long time to figure it out. And so I understand that times in my interviews when I play somebody else or I have an interview over Skype, there's background noise. I try when I have an interview over Skype to go put the dog somewhere else. I'm really trying to do that. And it brings me back to the days I used to work in a studio. In fact, the interview I'm going to play again by Terry Lee today is from a studio, this time from Genesis, GCN, the station where Alex Jones still broadcasts. I used to work there. I think my show was right before his or after his, I think. Whatever. I've done a number of stories on that guy. But anyway, okay, so why am I'm not obsessed. Why do I think this is important? Well, it goes in line with what everything else I say. They've got people believing in the wrong things. They've got you believing that you're a citizen of the federal government. Well, you're actually a corporate citizen, and you're in capital letters when you write on that birth certificate, and that's not you. So I want you to become you, and we're going to show you how to do it. But in the meantime, I pulled up 2 birth certificates, and one was Marilyn Monroe's. She was born Norma Jean Mortensen in 1926, I believe, 23. And her name was in all capital letters. Then I pulled up a birth certificate of a man from Michigan in 1886. This was 18 years after the 14th Amendment was passed, which made you into a corporate citizen. And they still hadn't gotten with it because this guy had his name in lowercase. Okay? From the state of Michigan. So they were just getting started. Now you can bet that everybody, check your birth certificates in capital letters. And let me tell you where this originated. So we're going to do a little history lesson here. Originally, the Constitution limited the jurisdiction of the federal government by making citizens of the state in which they were born or resided. Okay? So the federal government didn't have jurisdiction over you. According to the Constitution, the federal government could only have jurisdiction on a person if they lived in Washington, D.C., or a U.S. territory. You see, Washington, D.C. is not a part of the United States. So that was before the 14th Amendment. But these Federalists came along, who took control of our government after the Civil War, instituted and when I researched this, the Jesuits were behind this as well. Instituted the 14th Amendment to protect the former slaves. This is when the black men were free, right? So all you black people out there, listen to me. So now, all these black people that came from other places were free. So the amendment allowed the former slaves to come under the jurisdiction of the federal government in order that the federal government could protect, they said, their constitutional rights Many blacks were still being abused by people, and the local or state governments would not come to their aid. So, guess what? The 14th Amendment, they say, may have freed the slaves from oppression of their neighbors, but it gave them and us now a new master, the federal government. So now, without us knowing, we're all slaves. And so the black people that today still think they're free, you're not a free man. You're a corporate property of the federal government with capital letters. So you're not free and I'm not free. So the federal government is now the new master of all the people. The 14th Amendment makes us citizens of the United States and of several states. This allows the feds to have jurisdiction over all of us that it never had before the 14th Amendment. Why don't we repeal it? Nobody talks about it. Did you hear this story on Fox? No. Do you hear it on CNN? No. You're never going to hear it. So basically, the 14th Amendment also states that the debt of the federal government cannot be questioned. Most people have received their United States citizenship when they received their Social Security card. With the Social Security card came income taxes. See, it just kept going. There was no income tax in 1918. I think it was what, in 1930 something? I'm not going to go into how, we are under statutory, perhaps admiralty law. This is a big, huge story. I don't want to get into that. But we all know that we have a citizens don't require a license or a permit. When we really start talking about this, and Terry Lee shows you how to get around it, how to do it right. We're going to get to that in a minute. But you got to show me in the Constitution or in your state constitution where the government has any right for such obedience to control your getting married, drive a car, start a business, or add on to your home, or improve your property. Well, you see, the reason is that since you're just property of the feds, guess what? You're just borrowing everything from them. Now, during the time the 14th Amendment was declared law, they provided with people a way out under these provisions. I'm not going to get into it, but that's been changed. So, there's just a little bit of history about why they passed the 14th Amendment. Now, you may not think it's important, but I do. Now, the first thing that you have to do, there's many, many steps, and I'm going to get into all the steps today and tomorrow with Terry Lee, as I'm going to play another interview I did with him on another network. But let me say this. The first step is this. We take it step by step. I remember when I started law school, it's like eating a big pizza. Just one piece at a time. And then you get through. So let's start this way. The first thing you really have to do is you got to go into your county court, superior court, and you've got to do a non-adversarial hearing. And you got to write up a brief. You go to the clerk and tell him what you want to do. Then you go into the judge with your brief. That, by the way, I can provide for you. If you want to try it, you can contact me at gregbeacon@gmail.com. And what you can do is go in there and declare who you really are and basically have it written out that you want to be Greg, high G, lowercase, Greg, Anthony, high A, lowercase, the rest. And I am a free, sovereign citizen, and that's my Christian name. That's who I am. And I want you, Judge, to declare that and give me a paper, and he will, that's stating so that I may be known for who I really am. And so it's interesting. Terry Lee did it. and a few of his friends in Washington. And if you want to do it, I can whip up a brief for you, and you can take that first step. And then listen to the other steps you can take after that if you choose. First thing I want to tell you, it's not easy. And I said that yesterday on my show. But again, let's listen to Terry Lee, again, as he tells you, and I think it's really the best program. It's not one of these crazy internet programs where you write a letter to the Queen or to the Pope. And it's not one of those scams where they charge you a lot of money and they start talking about all these things. You've got to do this very simply by erasing every contract, starting with your birth certificate, that you ever made with this corporate system, binding you to them. And once you do that, you're just putting them on alert, and you're not anti-American. You're basically saying that you are dealing with them as the United States corporation, and you are an alien. You are a sovereign citizen of the state you're in. And so you're kind of dealing with them as if you were Chile or if you were Norway or some other country. So really you're not, and the country happens to be the state of Michigan or the state of Iowa, which is in the United States, right? And the original idea of the federal government was just to protect the states, not to control every aspect of your life, and that's exactly what they're doing. I dare you to think of a story that comes out in these news broadcasts now that doesn't talk about the federal government. It's all-encompassing, and it's going to get worse. That's why you're hearing this cry for democratic socialism. It always turns into fascism and hunger, starvation, and death. So let's listen to Terry Lee, and if you have any interest in becoming a free sovereign, please contact me at gregbeacon@gmail.com, and I'll play this interview for you right now. It's really important.
Wednesday edition of the Investigative Journal. I'm your host, Greg Szymanski, and I'll be here from 4 to 6 p.m. Central Time. I'm still thinking about that old time I used to be on. And by the way, if you're used to listening to me at another time, an earlier time at another place, I'm now at 4 to 6 p.m. Central Time, also on Telstar 6 KU band, so you can listen there. And always hard-hitting guests, show that's been called The Alternative to the Alternative Media. And this show today, let me preface this, is only for listeners who still believe there is a hope to save this country. It's for listeners who are active participants in the democracy republic of this country. And it's for the people who haven't given up hope, the people who aren't just sitting back and saying we're defeated. This show is meant to help you. This show is meant to my guest is meant the whole thing is meant to put this whole story of America into perspective, not from a theoretical basis, but from a practical basis. And we're going to get to Terry Lee. And let me tell you why I brought Terry Lee back. He's been on my show before, but we always put Terry on in 1 hour, and always never had time, and always had to bring him back again. And then he was to get me some CDs that many of my listeners, over hundreds or 200 people, want this CD about how to free yourself from slavery of this country, how to become a free man. And let me tell you this. I have researched this from a legal point of view, being interested in the patriot movements for years. And Terry Lee from Spokane, Washington, has come up with the best plan I've seen, because he hasn't been one of these kind of guys that just does it himself. He's researched this thing for 10 years or more, and has come up with a plan where you can psychologically and practically feel as if you're a free man, not a slave to the system. So if you have some hope, do me a favor. Just get a pen and paper during this whole 2 hours, because you're going to need it. Because we're going to go back to the beginning with Terry and start from the beginning on how to do this plan. And then I promise we're going to get a CD up on my website at www.arcticbeacon, so people that want to get it can do this, because Terry's so busy that it's been hard to get that done. And I hear you there. Are you there, Terry?
Yeah, I'm here.
Well, I'm trying to give you a little bit of an introduction here. We're going to have 2 hours to get this whole story together. But anyway, we're going to get that CD this time, correct?
Yep.
Okay. How are you doing? What's the weather like there in Spokane, Washington?
It is sun shining, clear skies, not a cloud in the sky. Beautiful day.
All right, let's get right to it. We're going to have 2 hours to do this, and I've got a few news tidbits to bring up. Maybe at the next break I'll do that, so let's get right to you. Terry Lee, you have come up with a plan. You call it How to Become a Free Man in this country, and you do it systematically with a program and a plan. Why don't we begin by saying how you got interested in this? How long ago was it, and how this whole idea and how your plan has come to fruition? Go ahead.
Well, it started off with realizing that something was wrong. You go through the motions in life. You're in business, and the government has this power. You don't understand why they can do certain things and why they're not checked by the Constitution. All this, and finally, I got attacked by the IRS, who I beat in court back in 1992, and to go out and start digging into what was really going on, and then I found out that the whole thing was completely different than what I perceived it to be or what I thought I was taught, you say the Pledge of Allegiance and to the Republic for which this stands. Well, it has nothing to do with that, It's a corporation is what it is, and they pass these private copyrighted codes, and then you, through lack of protest, lack of understanding, lack of knowledge, volunteer in by your silence. You don't protest, so you become part of that system, and then you become under those rules and regulations. So then I started researching, well, how do you get out of this thing, see? And so one thing led to another. I went to lots and lots of meetings and listened to all the different patriot talk and all that. And what you got to do is sit down sometime and write down all of the adhesion contracts that you feel you've gotten into, such as, the birth certificate, the Social Security, which is the worst, and the marriage license, the driver's license, the hunt and fishing licenses, all these contracts that you've signed into in your life, and then how do you get out of all that? And then you got to realize that they don't issue any of us a license. They create what is called a legally built fictional trust, an all capital letter name. A lot of people think, well, that don't mean nothing. That's just the way the computers do it and all that. But the truth is, the Department of Licensing here in the state of Washington has openly admitted to us that they don't issue a flesh and blood man or woman any kind of a license. They create, since they are a fiction, a trust, a corporation, they create another trust. Then we, by our lack of understanding, sign a contract becoming the subrogate, trustee, agent for their trust, which gives us all the benefits and privileges of that trust, but also all the penalties and all the laws and codes that we got to follow because we volunteered into that system. Okay?
Right.
And so what I've done lately here in the last 2 years is we've been perfecting more and more all the time. Even since we talked to you last, we've got a little bit better paperwork now, and that is creating what is the paperwork that follows a restricted signature. So anytime you deal with a government agency and they hand you a form to fill out, ask them which questions are mandatory for you to answer and which ones are just requests, okay? Because they always put a lot of extra questions in there to get information to put in some computer bank somewhere so they know more about you. But ask that question. It's a very important question. Take the form, put it on a scanner, scan it, now alter it, change it, or make your own form very similar to those. It just has the questions that they have a legal right to ask for.
The book of Revelation says, the spirit of prophecy is the testimony of Jesus Christ. This is at the very heart of FirstAmendmentRadio.com. In that spirit, we have created the Prophecy Reality News app for all of your mobile devices, streaming First Amendment Radio 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Available for your Apple, Android device, and smartphone, absolutely free. Get the Prophecy Reality News app installed today so you can listen to First Amendment Radio wherever you are. The Prophecy Reality News app. Get it now.
Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of Nicholas Arthur's new book titled When the Third Temple is Built. That's crosstheborder.org. When it comes to prophecy today, much of the evangelical Christian world has their eyes on Israel, waiting and watching to see when the third temple will begin to be built. The plans are drawn, the Jewish people are eager. Most evangelical Christians today believe that the rapture will happen before the third temple is built. Hi, I'm Michael Eugene. I was taught that Daniel's 70th week was in the future. Is that really what the Bible teaches? Have we searched the scriptures and found this to be true? Why is it so important for a re-established Israel to build a third temple in Jerusalem? Is it necessary to build a temple on the same location already occupied by the Dome of the Rock? Is it necessary for sacrifices to take place in the temple on Temple Mount? Is there really a rapture followed by 7 years of tribulation? What is the New Testament temple? Can we identify history and prophecy? Who is the first beast in Revelation chapter 13? Who are the 7 kings in Revelation 17? I have asked all these questions, and I have found Nicholas Arthur's new book, When the Third Temple is Built, answers all these questions and more using Scripture to interpret Scripture. The Bible says that no prophecy of Scripture is of any private interpretation. Nicholas shows us in his new book, When the Third Temple is Built, how the Bible interprets prophecy and not man's private interpretation. Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of Nicholas Arthur's new book titled When the Third Temple is Built. That's crosstheborder.org.
The following program is labeled dangerous and off limits by the Supreme Jesuit command. But stand tall, people. Listen up, and you may just learn something.
Oh, dear Lord Jesus, this ain't happening, man. This can't be happening, man. This isn't happening.
Okay, folks, moving right along for the second half hour, we're trying to figure out how to become a free man in the United States. You'd wonder, the freest country in the world, but they've enslaved everybody without telling you. Yeah, look what was life like in America before the 14th Amendment, please. And some people say, well, what's the importance? My goodness, do you want the federal government to control every aspect of your life? Do you care? Wouldn't it be nice to live in a state where you'd have a little bit more control, where you could actually know your politicians, talk to them about real issues? No, these federal guys, look, I'm telling you, now you think of your state representative as a lower life official. He's nothing, right? They're more important. The most important person in your life is the sheriff. And boy, most of them have sold out. But we could get into that on another time. I'm trying to discuss the system of not becoming an anti-American sovereign citizen, but to become a real live person, representing yourself with the powers that be. You're not that fictitious character in all capital letters on your birth certificate that they choose to deal with you. You're not being dealt with properly. And it's important that you know that. Okay, before we get back to Terry Lee, I want to mention this. There's a couple stories going around that are really driving me crazy, in California especially. This movement to teach kids about sex education at a young age has gone too far. In California, right now, you're getting drag queens that are going into public libraries weekly to give speeches and read stories to children. Yes, that's what's happening. A Christian group is outraged, of course, and a proponent of the drag queen said they're just trying to give back to the community. Folks, drag queen, it's a perverted situation. And you're letting 6-year-old kids near them? And in one case, one was a sex offender. All right. Crazy, isn't it? Crazy, crazy, crazy. Secondly, this push to teach kids sex education is really gone too far. In another California school, 10 and 11-year-old girls were given condoms. And there was a model of a man with an erected penis on the teacher's desk. And the boys and the girls were sitting there, and they choose maybe 7 girls at a time, and they run around in a circle, and they call it a condom race. And the first one to put the condom on the model wins. That is going on in your public schools. Again, parents are outraged, but nobody listens. And the reason is, these same people that are proponents of this perversion are the first ones to scream, we can't allow our children to say prayers or to wear a cross in school. Nothing. We can't allow Christianity to even seep into the public schools. In a country that started out as Protestantism. It's insane. And just another thing, the most persecuted spiritual group in the world are Christians. Yes, if you start looking at it, it's very rarely covered in the progressive liberal press. But Christians around the world are the most persecuted group in the world. And this is being overlooked. And I'm not talking about Catholicism, because Catholicism is not Christianity. And, that's why you'll see a mosque on one corner and a Catholic church on another in a completely dominant Sharia law country. Right? Because they're buddies. So Catholicism basically is not. Christianity prescribes to the Bible, the true Word of God, right? According to Christians. Catholics do not. They read the Catechism and the traditions of the Catholic Church over the Bible. So they're not Christians. But here in America, they call them Christians. It's a sham. It's a scam. So, get with it. And to remind myself of it, I'm going to have Tuesday a gentleman by the name of Bert Krantz on my show. And years ago, we did many stories on the Alamo ministry. Tony passed away, the head of that ministry. He was always, we know the story, how that group was persecuted. And we're going to revisit that story Tuesday. And I know Bert will have a lot of information about persecution of Christians around the world. Okay. Without further ado, as Ed Sullivan would say, many of you people out there don't even know who he is. Let's get back to Terry Lee and how to become a free man in a slave country. Yes. Well, you're really not in chains. They're just kind of contract chains. And they did it in kind of a sneaky lawyer trick manner to get you to believe you're free when exactly they got you by the you-know-what. Okay, let's get back to Terry Lee. And I'm going to go way back to a 2006 interview I did with him. But nothing has changed.
Today, I'll tell you what, we're getting right down to it. And, many people out there, I'm as guilty as anybody else in this. And let me say this. We're talking about how to become a free man and how to get out of this corporate system slavery that we're in. Now, I do a lot of talking about a lot of stories, and so do a lot of other patriot broadcasters, and so do a lot of other good people. But you know what? When we start saying, we're not a part of this, I believe the government isn't doing this right. You know what? We are a part of it because we're still locked in chains to this corporate system that Terry's telling us about. And this happened after the Civil War. We live in a state, but basically the state has no power anymore because we have, as individuals, allowed the federal government to hoodwink us. This program, I tell you, puts them back a few steps. It allows you to do something practical. Because you know what happens a lot of time with patriots? And I'll tell you, they're the greatest people in the world, but sometimes they feel the only way they can live in this country is to hide, to be somebody that's not a part of it, to just go away. But you can't do that. You must deal with your American citizens. You want to have a business. You want to have a life. But you always feel like you're never getting ahead. Well, this program will get you ahead because it will make you realize who you really are, not a slave to the corporation, but basically a sovereign citizen of whatever state you choose to reside in. And that's why I'm going to put this CD up on my website. I'm going to help people and make sure that you get the knowledge that Terry has spent years of his life, 10 to 15 years gathering. And I'll tell you what, I know when this show comes on, the people in power just shudder because they don't want people to know the real power that we have and each one of us has to do it the proper way. You want to get back to that Social Security card and how to get rid of it?
Well, what we have, Greg, is we have a 47-page brief that you have to sign with a restricted signature as well, that you turn into the Social Security Department, and then what you're doing is rescinding your signature on terminating the contract, and they'll verify it back, but if you don't do it the correct way, they send it back in the all-capital letter name again. They don't recognize it. You got to follow a certain procedure. So, but it is possible. You can break that contract. Now, in my case, I haven't been involved with Social Security for over 30 years. I have not been paying in. I'm definitely not getting anything back. Okay? Now, the people that have paid in for the last 30, 40 years, they're saying, well, that's my money I put in there, and I want it back. And the problem is, what they've done to us is said, sure, put some in, we'll guarantee you get a whole bunch back, but they didn't tell you that you're locked into a contract that gives them power and authority over every aspect of your life. And that's what happened with the Social Security contract. So
you get a 47-page brief on how to get out of the Social Security, get your Social Security card rescinded, and important how to do that and never use it again. And you basically go back to that same court case that you opened up regarding your name change, right?
That's correct.
Okay.
Everything you want to confirm as being true and correct, you go through due process and run it through that private court case and get a certified document back, verifying it, see? Mm-hmm. The only way their system, their superior court system, is going to acknowledge what you're trying to prove is if you go through due process, and that's give the world a notice to protest, make comment or such, and you have to do it through a disinterested third party, which is a notary, a state agent. The notary puts the ads in the paper, the notary does the affidavits, they do all this stuff, and then you use the notary's affidavits, annex to your court case documents you're going in for verification, and it happens. It just flat happens. It's very simple to do as long as you follow the paper trail, okay?
Right. The question becomes, we got to talk about this. I want you to tell your experience. I know you drive without a driver's license, and I know that you also have license plates. You don't drive with many you see Patriots, free man, you get pulled over. But you have a plan, and you've gone through this. So tell people why they don't really need their driver's license and what you got to do to go through rescinding that, and also explain also the insurance, the registration, and all that kind of stuff, so people understand how you travel in Washington.
I have to admit that what I do is I don't put any vehicle in my name. I put it in the name of a spiritual society I created. A lot of people used to do Corp souls. I don't do Corp souls anymore because it is a corporation. It's under their control. So I do pure spiritual religious societies. They're not incorporated, not licensed, and I get them recognized by due process of law, and then I put property under them, vehicles under them, and then that's what I locomote around in. Okay?
Yeah, that's interesting.
Term.
Let's get to the license, and then this whole idea of what's wrong with these corporation souls and what you've done with religious corporations, which people can do, which I really like, is an idea to protect your property and your car. But tell us about the driver's license, particularly. I know you don't have one, and you drive just like anybody else.
Well, here's what the people that are inside the system, okay, which is 99% of the people. What you want to do is when you get the driver's license, is put down at the bottom, take a pen that writes very fine ink, okay, very fine point pen, practice at home, and write under there, not a contract, and UCC 1-207, which means you're staying in your private capacity, okay?
Okay.
And so, and not a contract, and there's 3 or 4 different ways some of the people have done have been successful, and when they get pulled over and the officer reads it, then he says, you have a nice day. But in my case, I don't have a license because I don't want to have any contracts with them at all. And so you have to have gone through the process I have and have the identification that I have for the officer to say, well, I'm not going to write you a ticket, okay? Because he doesn't want to go there. And I inform him, I say, look, I'm not on that side. I said, if you do attempt to put a ticket out here in front of me to sign that has an all-capital letter name on it, and I'm telling you I'm not a party to that system, if you force me into signing that signature, prepare yourself to go to federal court in your private capacity for trespass and fraudulent conversion. And
okay, so you don't have a driver's license and you had some identification in your car. You got pulled over. What happened?
Well, first off, you're very polite to these people. Don't create a scene, okay? And you just explain who you are and what you are. But you got to have the identification to prove that. And I have court orders, so it takes them a long time when they go back to their car with all these court orders I got. And when they come back, they say, you're free to go. Well, it's only because I have followed the steps I'm doing and produce their acknowledgments that I'm on the private side, okay? Without this paperwork, they're going to write you a ticket.
Right.
Okay? And the reason that we go around with carts have this corporate state's license on it is just to keep from being pulled over. You drive the speed limit, you get your seatbelt on, all that. You're not trying to flaunt yourself out there that you can beat them. You stay out of the way. If you do get pulled over, you got the identification to prove who you are, okay?
And that identification has superseded the need of a license in your case and where you live.
Well, it is because it's their court, superior court judges that are giving me the identification, okay? If I didn't have that and I had some made-up Patriot ID card, they call it fake ID and they write you a ticket and you go to court and they don't recognize, you know.
Okay.
Did
you ever have to go to court over the fact you didn't have a driver's license and show the judge your paperwork regarding your acknowledgement by the court that you're a sovereign citizen?
Before you even talk to the judge, you got to enter some paper into the record verifying who and what you are, and that you're only entering their system, threat, duress, and force because of a gun being pointed at your head, forcing you to appear there to their fiction, and that when you go to court, as soon as the...
Okay, listen, I got to take a second hour, and I'm with Terry Lee, and we're talking how to become a free man and not a slave to this corporate 14th Amendment citizen BS that's been going on ever since the end of the Civil War. And, of course, we talked about Roosevelt's Social Security program, which binded more people not only to getting money back, but to the corporate system. So we talked about that also. But now here I am, Terry. I'm driving. I have all the documentation that you have, and that means I'm showing that the court cases that show I'm a sovereign citizen. And I'm doing 20 miles over the speed limit and get pulled over by a police officer. Tell me what you would do in that position.
I'd pay the ticket because I wasn't supposed to be going 20 miles an hour over. That's what I would do. But now, if I got pulled over for a taillight being out and something like that, then I would fight the system, okay?
Okay, so what I'm getting at is when I get stopped for 20 miles over the speed limit, I get a ticket. Do I sign that with a restricted signature again? Or what do I do there?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, but then he says...
Involuntary trustee forced by Viet Armis means there's a gun at your head, okay?
Okay, then he says...
Viet Armis, look that up in the dictionary.
Okay, then he says, Greg, where's your driver's license? And I say, I don't have one. I have my...
well, first off, you say, I'm not driving. Driving is a commercial term. Then he'll say, well, you're operating. I say, well, operating is a commercial term by the state's definition. I'm not operating. I'm locomoting. You have to have a right answer, and I could go through this with somebody on just that issue, but they got a little microphone on all the time, and they're asking you a lot of questions, okay? You got to answer them correctly, but basically it's holding your own, you know. And
so
a lot of people just get frustrated when that happens,
So basically, you don't want to act like a smart act and say, officer, I'd like to be specific here. I'm not driving. I am not what's the other term used? You're not operating. You're locomoting.
I'm operating. I'm locomoting. Look up the word locomotion in the dictionary.
Okay. At that
Carry
point,
on for a minute. I'm going to get off for just a second. Go ahead.
Okay. He's got to get off for just 1 second to talk to some person over at the. I bet he's buying something at this Washington State auction. I got to ask him what's over there. Are you back?
Yep.
Okay, good. What'd you buy?
Oh, I'm bidding on a couple ice makers right now and a bunch of other stuff. We bought a D6 cat today for $18,000 for a project we got going. We bought a lot of stuff today. So.
Okay, good. Well, Terry's at an auction. He just bought a cat. What is it? A $18,000 what? Tractor?
It's a used Caterpillar Dozer D6C with a 6-way blade on it. So you can do a lot of work with that thing.
And you got a good deal on it?
That's pretty good, yeah. They're new. They're well over 100,000, so.
Okay, good. Well, listen, so then you show him, you be polite to the officer, then you say, you show him your paperwork, correct?
Well, yeah, I say, look, they don't issue people like me a license, and here's the reason why. And I said, I've been to the court, and I've verified who and what I am, and I don't volunteer into this system. I'm not a party to it, and so here's your paperwork. Go check it out. Now, what we're trying to do, Greg, is we're trying to get our hands on these NCIC computer programs, the Interpol program, and Interpol is like the FBI of Europe that has a database on everybody in the world, and whenever these police cars pull up a name, then it's usually in all capital letters, and it has a complete file on that name, see?
Right.
What we want to do is get our Christian name on those files with a separate file on that has no connection to this legal fiction that they're putting everybody under, see?
Right.
And then when they get us on there, it says, well, you know, let this guy go, don't bother with him. And in the local area here, the deputies don't bother me, even though I don't have a license, and they know I don't have a license, is because they know I can drag out every court case for 3 years, following their procedure. So I have a little bit of respect from that point. As far as if I'm outside my area in another area, then I got to deal with those guys, and I got to have the right words. And sometimes we go to court, but by the time we get to court, they're ready to dismiss the issue. So it's a matter of perfecting this paperwork and getting their acknowledgement by court order, by this private court case, of a number of issues. Okay.
Right.
So that's why it's so important for everybody to have their own private court case, to get everything they need acknowledged by the other side and carry that paperwork with you, you know. So if paper you better have the right one.
Yeah, and what you're basically doing is just using the proper paperwork to show the officer that you are not a corporate citizen and do not need a driver's license to locomote on the roads of this country, right?
Well, everybody has the right to travel freely. Everybody does. Unless you contract with the other side, now you're underneath their fictional trust, and you have to obey their rules of the road, okay? And that means have a license.
Yeah,
when you look in the, it says when the person does this and the person does that. It doesn't say when the man or the woman does this. It's when the person does this. So the person to a corporation, a business, a partnership that's controlled by the state. It doesn't refer to a flesh and blood man or woman.
Right. Now, are you there, Terry?
Yeah.
Okay, so you now drive without the license. You're not part of the corporate system there. You haven't opted in, so basically you're not advocating. You follow all the rules of the road of safety, things like that. But how do you handle, we're going to talk a minute, we're going to get into this religious corporation that you formed, but how do you handle your registration, and we'll do it, we only have a minute here, and your insurance?
Okay. The registration is done in the name of the private spiritual religious society, and that's it. And you give them the paperwork. Anytime you fill a government document out, you always fill with a restricted signature and an annexed affidavit, not an attached. Annexed means part of, and that's how you start the process. Insurance, you cannot get insurance because they only, and I've asked over a dozen different insurance companies, not one insurance company will issue an insurance policy to a sovereign state citizen. They only issue them to state-created, legally built fictional trusts. They all capital letter name.
Interesting.
There is. You have to go to what they call one of these co-ops that a lot of the state insurance commissioners don't like. But I know there's one in Hawaii, and there's in Canada. Washington here, we used to have one called the Puget Sound Agricultural Society. That's where hundreds and hundreds of people gather together, pool their money, and they post a bond with the state. And
Okay, listen, we're going to take a break, Terry.
Yes.
We're going to be back in 4 minutes on the Investigative Journal with our final half hour with Terry Lee.
Okay, we're back here in 2019. Greg Anthony here. Hope you enjoyed that. There's so much more on this. And during the next week or so, I'll sporadically put in a show. We got about 30 seconds. But the one thing I wanted to say is it's not easy to do this. As you can see, it's very technical. And boy, what it tells me is that they really thought about this before they basically entered into this new 14th Amendment. And I think as the years went on, they perfected getting us locked into the system, making it almost impossible to get out. And most people will just say the hell with it. Well, anyway, we're not going to do that on this show. We'll be back Monday on the Investigative Journal.
The book of Revelation says, the spirit of prophecy is the testimony of Jesus Christ. This is at the very heart of FirstAmendmentRadio.com. In that spirit, we have created the Prophecy Reality News app for all of your mobile devices, streaming First Amendment Radio 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Available for your Apple, Android device, and smartphone, absolutely free. Get the Prophecy Reality News app installed today so you can listen to First Amendment Radio wherever you are. The Prophecy.
Since the beginning of time, kings have sought it, nations have fought for it. It has been traded, it has been borrowed, it has been purchased, it has been stolen. There's a reason for it. To secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and to our posterity. Invest with the security of gold and silver. Call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188 or visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net. Listen to Financial Survival with your host Melody Cedarstrom right here on FirstAmendmentRadio.com at 4 p.m. Eastern or 1 p.m. Pacific Time. Visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net or call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188. Toll free 1-800-375-4188.